Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning at HIPEC's Round Policy and Visa Reform. Today, we are going to talk about the big shifts in immigration policies under Trump administration. Sorry, I can't speak this morning. So we've seen, the Georgia immigration rate, the H-1B application fee, which is now like $100,000, and some changes to student visa rules earlier this year. Like a lot happened this year. It's happening even today. So we are very fortunate and lucky to have you here, Ellen. And thank you so much for joining us this morning. And I thought to start, let's just start broad here. So Trump administration this year starting, he rolled out many executive orders in immigration space. And what's his really overall like strategy behind his agenda from your perspective?
Right. So I think when we think about executive orders, we should think about that in the way we talk about American law, and that an executive order is not law. An executive order is a wish from the president to do some sort of enforcement within the people within his branch, the executive branch. It gives the executive branch orders under the US law. So a lot of his executive orders are talking to the people, sort of saying to them, this is what I would like to happen, and this is what I would like to administrate. Even with the H-1B, that's a prime example. He said that this is what's going to happen, but that's not the force of law yet until it actually comes into place. So this administration, because of the way that the election sort of happened, has a strong talk of saying, we are going to be the enforcers of immigration. We're going to protect US jobs, and we're going to make sure that people who don't have the appropriate documentation are removed from the country. So the message is, I'm really strong on immigration, and I'm the person who can lead us forward in this. And the problem is, or the situation is, there's been a vacuum in immigration regulations for over 20 years. And so now we see that he's sort of doing things through executive order instead of through the whole branches of government.
Yeah, so we just talked about how Trump administration is focusing on the immigration and executive orders, not exactly the enforcement of law, right? But that it seems like Trump has enough power to change things, right? So how is his agenda different from the previous administrations? What's your take?
So I think the take is more than the message that people are in control. I mean, he has a different person who is his number two in the White House, who's very familiar with immigration, who's able to sort of handle the administration of immigration. So there's two ways. You can have a bill that says that you should do something, and then the executive branch has to carry it out. So the executive branch has the right to put the managers in place, the people who are sort of working behind it. So if they choose not to follow the law or to delay the law, to cause friction by it, say, you take longer, you do extra vetting, you do these things. This is what we see from this administration. So the technique is different than what it's been in the past. And from previous administrations, while there was an understanding there was an issue with immigration to be solved, it wasn't seen as a harm to the United States. It has always been seen as a net gain in every administration, right? Even in the Obama administration, the very first thing he said he was going to do was immigration reform. Then he got pushback from the party and they did healthcare first. Immigration was supposed to be second.
That's really interesting. So I want to kind of go back to the H-1B, as you mentioned. So, and within that Trump's immigration strategy, where to implement based visas like H-1B fit? And is this more like a second, as you kind of mentioned, a side issue, or are they a real priority compared to border and asylum policies?
So when you think about H-1Bs in the total workforce of Americans, it's such a small number. It's almost like around 1% of the total pool of jobs that are available. So what this administration is really good is finding something that is very small and making it seem very large for people who are Americans who feel disenfranchised. So one of the challenges we have in this country is having individuals who have the skill set to fill a lot of jobs in different industries, specifically from different countries, or to sort of do the technology setup. And so we supplement ourselves with H-1Bs. For every H-1B we bring to this country, we get 1.8 American jobs. So for every H-1B, we almost get 2 jobs. So that's amazing for the US economy. That's been shown in studies. What the Trump administration has heard is that engineers can't get jobs because of foreign nationals coming in. And what we know the reality is, it's not the foreign nationals, it's AI, right? AI is supplementing a lot of the code jobs, a lot of the low-level jobs that Americans were doing before. And so therefore they're being pushed out of the market across the broader scheme. And so it now becomes a message to say, let me give you an enemy. It's the H-1Bs that are causing the job, when there's only there's under 1 million H-1Bs in the United States total at any time. working adults.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So it sounds like H-1B is not a big portion in
Not a
the
big
US
portion.
job market, but
Mm-mm.
yet Trump is using it as one of his political agendas. Do
Yes.
you think that it's just a political tool that he's trying to use, or is it, or behind some weird logic that he heard from his intel? Like, what do you think?
I think it's a weird logic, and I think it's a way that he thinks he's punishing other people.
Mhm.
One of the things that we're not smart about is understanding how we can grow together.
Mhm.
We're looking at a very isolated world, and so we don't understand the benefits of having workers come in, companies come in and sort of expand the job market. So it's a one-for-one situation because we think there's a lump of jobs. And if one person loses a job, there's another
Right.
person for that job. But if we look at the economy, one of the biggest fictions that we need to sort of start expressing in immigration is there is no lump of jobs,
Mhm.
right? That is a fallacy. Jobs are dynamic. So if I create a job and bring one person in, they could create a whole enterprise such as Google or Apple from another country that would never exist here if you didn't have that one person to sort of start that enterprise in the United States. As well as even with foreign national students, we have over 70% of our STEM programs are foreign national students. And while a large number of those have decreased in the number of Koreans coming to the country recently, they're still there. And about 40% of Koreans are in undergraduate program, and then there's another 30% that is in the graduate programs. And once they get these degrees from the United States that we trained them for, then we're saying to them, we don't want you here anymore. That doesn't make sense for us as a technique to sort of have that sort of philosophy. This H-1B phenomenon, this fee reality that's going on should make companies think different about the way they sort of structure and hire. There will be some large American companies that are able to pay the $100,000 if they have to pay it because, right, first, it's not law, because it's not a fee.
Yeah.
A fee is something that you pay for processing a visa. You know, it doesn't cost $100,000 to process a visa.
Yeah.
So it's either a tax, which has to be implemented by Congress, or it's a travel ban, which will be processed through the court. So there are two big challenges to that 100,000 thing that's coming through. And then within the bill, there's a lot of discretion that says, if it's to the country's will, the government could allow or waive that fee. And we know how they're going to waive the fee back and forth, right? So doctors, teachers, perhaps, but maybe some other industries. But what that says to a small company, because that's the real issue that it hurts two things. Hurts a small American startup, right? I'm an American person. I just graduated from college. I have this great concept and ideal. I'm getting a lot of angel funding, and I want to sponsor this one person who can do this tech program for me, this AI thing for me, but I don't have the $100,000. So I'm out of the market. So either I have to sell my concept to another company or it just dies, which isn't good for the American as far as dynamics. If you're a large company, then it doesn't matter, you have the $100,000. But if you're smart about it, and as an immigration lawyer, I will say this, you will re-engineer the way you do your program. You will say, okay, I want to hire this person. I'm going to move this person abroad for a year and then bring them back under the L program. Why would you pay the outrageous fees for an H-1B program, the limitations in the H-1B program, if there are other visas that are available for you that aren't limited by the cap and not limited by the season? So it's about planning and thinking forward about how do I administer this better for my company than sort of getting caught up that I'm going to pay this fee and that fee. And in situations where you find a worker that you need an H-1B from in the United States, you say, great, I'm going to bring them abroad for a year, train them, and then bring them back here in a different way. Much cheaper than paying a $100,000 fee, the attorney fees, the risk of the lottery. Because as we think about the lottery, it's a weird thing that someone applies to get a visa in March or April, and then they don't start their job until October.
Right, yeah. So I think you just mentioned a lot of like important topics here. So we're gonna unpack throughout the questions that I asked. So first you mentioned about the jobs are not really zero sum, you know, like one person comes in, then there might be more opportunities for other workers, right? I think that's really important. And in terms of that, you know, there was Georgia Raid, you know, which Korean workers and engineers were involved, and they came here to the US with the short-term visas, right? To work for Korean manufacturers, right? So in your experience, so what did that incident reveal about compliance risk or legal risk? And does it point to a larger trend in US enforcements that the Korean firm should be watching for?
So on behalf of the American people that are from the immigration bar, I apologize for that happening because it is foolishness in a way. It is embarrassing to our country and the facts that have sort of come after that. And as someone who grew up in Georgia, as a product of Georgia, went to school in Georgia, it's very embarrassing to me because we have a large Asian community that's growing up in North Georgia to sort of have this stain on our back. What happened in Georgia was an opportunity that some person who was not sophisticated in immigration took and said, I see a lot of foreign nationals that are not speaking English, and I think that they should be removed. And I've seen a large number of them, and I don't think they have the appropriate work authorization. And then some person within ICE decided, this is our opportunity to go prove something to the world that there's going to do this worksite enforcement.
Mhm.
And then they went to the worksite enforcement site without someone who speaks Korean, without the language skills, without checking with the government to see what the visas the individuals were on.
Mhm.
And they arrested all these people,
Yeah.
rounded them in, and treated them like they were people who were undocumented. Even people who are undocumented should not be treated in a harsh and inhumane position.
Mhm.
But those engineers and people from the subcontractor who are setting up a company to help build America, and Georgia specifically, definitely should not have been treated that way. So it's a lesson for the United States people, and the lawsuits that are following from the different engineers and people who are working there who have to, one, get their visa record cleared is one, but two, the United States can't operate this harshly and this quickly in companies when there's a gap in the visa market. If this was the first time that this situation had been used for this company to set up this plant, I would say, okay, this is an anomaly, this has happened, blah, blah, blah. It happens all the time because we don't have short-term technical visas.
Right.
We don't have a specific visa for Korea
Yeah.
to come in and do these technical programs, but we say we want your money, we want your investment, we want your company. And then when you have proprietary information, you're not going to give that to an American when you're just setting up the company. So once again, here's a prime example of the lump sum job situation. Those jobs, those 300 people that were going to make 1,000 jobs in Georgia has now been prevented because all they were doing was setting up that company. So why would they need to hire someone in America to do this for them when they do this across the world?
Right.
And they already have individuals that do it. And so it's a benefit. So that's the cost benefit analysis that went awry. I don't think there'll be any more enforcement actions this badly done.
Okay.
I don't think it was specifically focused at Koreans. I think it was focused at undocumented people. And I think the novice American can't tell the difference, right? They think everybody's Chinese, everybody's whatever.
Right.
So it's unfortunate that it happened. I think the analysis and the lawsuits that will follow will correct the issue.
Yeah.
There will be worksite enforcement for lower level things such as plants and the like. There will now be a conversation about the use of ESTA visas and visitors visas, which has been a conversation for years. There are many famous cases about this. There's the most famous case being one about a Chinese tailor who would come to the United States and sort of do suits. And the question was, did he need a work visa when he was in the United States, sort of taking the measurements for the suits? So he was a seasonal person. He would come over, take measurements, then go back to China and actually make the suits. And the government said, well, he's not working when he's coming in and just taking the measurements. That's not worth in itself after that. Then we see in other companies where people were coming over sort of doing tech jobs. And then you sort of saw the blow up that happened with Google last year and them sort of talking about people who are using these different terms of visas. It should not be on the business community to have the burden to kind of guess if they can do what they've always done in the past. If you're going to change the way you're enforcing something, then tell us you're changing the way that you're enforcing something. And then when you make the deal with us to open a plant, because there are a lot of government deals on a federal level and on a state level, then you say, this is how I'm going to have to negotiate to get the people in to sort of do this work. That's what is the issue now. So as you know, there's a bill pending, which may not go anywhere specifically for Koreans in the House, but there's new light about it after this, what happened, which I think would be good for the Korean population to sort of have the conversation of saying exactly how many businesses are here in the United States and how can we develop this better? Or we're gonna put in the regulations specifically, if you're coming in for this short period of time, because they weren't coming in for years, right? It was like a very short period of time, 90 days, to sort of do this setup and training, then it's okay to do that. So I think that's regulation, and that's something that this administration is looking at harshly because, as you know, many of the individuals who were impacted are suing the companies. I mean, the plant specifically has, because there was a lot of subcontractors. It wasn't even the plant employees. You know, sort of ruining Hyundai's name in the news is just not okay. So there's going to be a lot of lawsuits that might correct the issue. The issue right now in immigration is this administration is more forceful. So they will do something and look for permission in law later. Whereas other administrations would wait and say, is this legal first before they do it? So this administration is more willing to see you in court than to deal with what the ramifications are first. And that's one of the things that companies should understand, that if you're doing something that's in the gray zone, I would check with someone before and get that clear. And I do think, you know, what could companies do in the future is to expressly say this to everybody that's involved. One of the issues would be say, make sure that everybody in that area knows this is happening so that people aren't caught in this situation and that these aren't people who are from China and they're not, you know, a chicken plant or whatever. These are highly technical people. That's one. Two, pick friendlier states. don't pick states that you know there may be issues. Texas being one of those states, right? There's a lot of states that sort of has this anti-immigrant feeling and buzz about them. Tennessee, Alabama, places where you see governors step out and saying, we're going to really get behind these immigrants and it's a problem. There are other places, California, New Jersey, Illinois, where you see governors that are saying, we welcome immigrants here. We want to build something together. So, companies should make decisions based on the profitability and where they need to be. But the safety of the worker and the living prospect is super important.
I think that's great advice for the Korean companies, actually, because I don't think we really think about the immigration sentiment within that state, right? So I don't know, you following this morning, I think at the Bloomberg, actually, there was news that LG Berry plant, they're gonna start sending Korean workers back after Koreans, like there's a big holiday right now called Chuseok. So, I am glad that they're going back, but at the same time, I'm a little worried about that because they went through such harsh treatment for a week at the detention center, right? You mentioned that like the way that the US is treating is just kind of it's usual, but the way that Koreans are treated, was this right? And why does the US treat and hold people in this way?
I can't explain that situation. I think it's linked to what they consider an invasion and combat people. Clearly we weren't in a combat situation. There were no guns involved. Nobody was sort of doing anything inappropriate. I think it's, why would humans, this is a global issue, why do humans treat other humans this way around the globe? And we have fallen into this crack of sort of saying, we want people to feel so much that they don't want to come back, right? It's supposed to be a deterrent to say, if you're going to be caught, that this is your lesson, right? And I don't think the lesson for wanting a better life, whether you do it through the legal system or the undocumented system, should be punishment and degradation. Sure, if you violate a crime, you should pay whatever that is, or if you're here undocumented, you might need to be removed in some cases, but you don't get to be dehumanized in that situation for wanting something better for yourself, regardless of what the circumstance may be. But in this circumstance, specifically where they were drinking water off of the floor, it shows you the lack of sophistication that we may have with some of our facilities and how we should upgrade ourselves as American people. Because even as America on the forefront to the world, we sort of have a platform where we say, this is what we think about humans, and we're not going to treat anyone this way, regardless of the number of the circumstances. They didn't have the appropriate facilities. They didn't have the appropriate food. They didn't have the appropriate translators. I think there has been something behind the back screen sort of fixing that within the government to make people think they want to come back because we do need to complete the plan and things like that. And I understand the business way forward. But as you know, once you stick a nail in a wall and you remove that nail, it doesn't make the hole go away. No matter if you plaster over it or you paint over it, there's still going to be that injury there. And so individuals who are choosing to come back, who went through that circumstance, are in the back of their mind going to be aware and apprehensive about how they live their life and how they move in the United States, which should not be the way it happens.
So the Bloomberg article said that the workers will come with ESTA or B1 visa, and they will be allowed to do the same work, right? So clearly Korea does not have specific or the designated visa categories for this, which other FTA partners like Chile, Australia, and what else? The one more country, Singapore. They have something more specific for their workers, right? And since 2013, Congress has been introducing this bill called Partner with Korea Act, right? But more than a decade, it hasn't passed, right? It's like hitting some barriers. And why is that? Why is it so hard to pass that law, even though we have a lot of presence here and we invest a lot of money in the US, right? So why is that?
So I think anything immigration moving alone in Congress is hard. So as a single immigration bill, those things are just hard to sort of process unless they were already before. In Congress, you need champions. And right now, the Congress, you have 3 people, I think, in the House and 1 person in the Senate. All Korean-born American Koreans elected. So I think you need to leverage that going forward and show the numbers. Getting anything through on immigration is going to be pressure. But what I think is unique about what you read from me from Bloomberg, which I didn't have a chance to read this morning, is that it's no different than what they were doing before.
Exactly.
It isn't as if they said, now there's something new. They were already doing what they're saying the solution is that they were doing, so therefore they weren't doing anything wrong. So it can't be seen as if, oh my God, I've created something in a vacuum that has always existed, which basically shows that that was a bad enforcement choice when they made it. So in the space where there's not that visa category, the other way is to lean in to build up this other category to sort of show the numbers. the reporting needs to be strong to the
Mhm.
government about what the Korean relationship brings to the United States
Mhm.
over and over again, in the same way that we sort of see, I mean, just because China is so voluminous is an example, but we see the students, tourism,
Right.
business, the numbers are sort of presented over and over and over again. This national who did this national who did that in the program. I think the way that it's presented to the different areas and dynamics is super important, but also you have to have those governors in those states behind you saying, we recognize there's a Korean population here. And because, as I've said before, for the general American, everybody's just Asian.
Right.
They don't see the dynamics of that relationship. They may even be given the benefit of your country to China because they just can't distinguish the difference of what's happening in the market. And that's just a reality. And for many years, I worked for Baker McKenzie, which is a large global firm, and we have a huge footprint in China.
Okay.
And so I was able to sort of see the way people sort of, view the bear of China
Right.
across the board, which is, so you have to distinguish yourself in that market. And I think foreign students is one, those numbers are down. Company representation is another one.
Yeah.
But you have to show the link, you have to make the link from the individuals to the business to the development, going back and forth in both ways.
Yeah.
And I think another aspect, because as I speak about, is tourism. I have not had the opportunity to be to Korea yet, but I know that it's I've been to Asia for the first time. I know it's very beautiful. It's a far flight. You have to invest in sort of that thing. But I think promoting that to Americans to sort of see what it is and the beauty that you have exists. I mean, in DC, we're very linked to China because of the cherry blossoms and all of those things that sort of go along in Japan. And the link that it sort of goes because of the Korean festival and there's a Korean festival here, right? Is there not?
Is it? I have no idea.
Oh, I know there's a Chinese festival that's pretty big, and then there's the cherry blossoms that's pretty big. That sort of links those two companies.
But Korea doesn't really have that big presence here.
And so that would be one thing in the nation's capital, where you have the nation's leaders for almost 8 months of the year. You should present yourself in such a way that you say, this is what my stamp is on. And even in immigration, I know the numbers are significant, but I can't give a specific example outside of this plan. So this plan is a prime example of also says, this is an opportunity to promote exactly what that relationship exists. Because before the plan, I didn't think about it in that way because I do a lot of technical work, tech work. So I think about a lot of India. I do a lot of stuff from the continent of Africa, from the different countries, a lot of Nigerian doctors that come over. So it wasn't introduced in such a way to say, this is what we add. And I think that that's really important to have that conversation with the American people of saying, this is what we add. As of now, I'm sure there are a lot of medical professionals that come over from Korea, and I can't even tell you, I know that there's medical device companies that are.
Device companies, that's a big thing.
Yeah, and I can't name the brands off the top of my head to sort of someone who works in immigration to explain that to people. So I think when people become very familiar with something and they know that it helps them, then they're able to promote it in a different way. And that's what Congress will get behind. Because remember, congressional people aren't sophisticated professors. They're everyday business people who got elected by people around them to say, I want you to lead us. And if they don't know you, they don't see you.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a really great point that you made. Just, Korea has to increase our profile and presence in DC, using some symbols or using some programs or company or like whatever, right? So you touched on the $100,000 fee on H-1B application. And can you explain a little bit more about that? Because Trump administration wasn't super clear how they're gonna charge that fee. And you mentioned two different barriers like tax and all that. So could you just unpack?
So let's think about first executive order, not a law. Said it's a fee, not a fee, right? Because it costs more than that. So it is either going to be presented to us as a tax, which means it has to go through Congress because only Congress can create a tax, or it's a travel ban because it's for new people coming in. It was presented sloppily because they're saying it applies to next year's H-1Bs, but they presented it in such a way at late Friday night that it was applying to all H-1Bs. It caused great disturbance. And so many lawsuits were filed. California currently has a lawsuit that's already pending, although they haven't had the repercussions of it yet. Then there's this new regulation that came out that said if you're making more money, you have a greater chance of getting an H-1B by the amount of money that you're making, which seems odd to me, that you'd want to reward people for paying H-1B workers more money than sort of saying, this is the system, this is the training visa, what it's sort of set up to do. Sort of the lottery itself, the administration of the lottery can be done by the administration. So they have to go through rules and regulations, and that's what was presented. So that's okay to have. We're going to have that conversation debate, and people should write in and say, that's foolish to say the person who makes the most money has the most opportunity to get an H-1B. And that may not be linked to the best benefit for the United States. As we have known, most of the companies that were founded by immigrants that did really well here were refugees. So therefore, there wasn't either educational background to it or a financial background to it. It was from individuals who were fleeing a situation. They got here and thought, this is my opportunity in the platform, and they built these companies. So there's no strong link to that. And it also causes, inflators to do something. And then once again, if you're a small company, you're going to pay what you can pay.
Right.
If you're a large company, then you're going to be able to do that. And those large companies is much like tariffs. Sure, they'll pay the $100,000 fee, but all the gadgets that we buy or the products of that company is going to increase the cost. So the American people are paying for it. So it's really not a smart way to sort of determine H-1Bs, because H-1Bs aren't the problem, because there's only 85,000 of them a year total, and there are over 500,000 applicants, right? So think about it this way. If we looked at H-1Bs and we said, like anything else, it's a market position, let the market decide, let companies decide how many H-1Bs we have. If we had that 400,000 H-1Bs for whatever year, and they create 2 jobs each, what a benefit that is for the American people, rather than sort of limiting and having this cost fee analysis. And so people say, well, that's for an immigration lawyer, you benefit from doing H-1Bs, blah, 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 blah. Everybody benefits from business. I don't make any qualms about, it's a business thing that I do to help people get visas. Being in business should not be a problem, because that's what the government does as well.
Right.
So if you're in the business of doing things, you want the thing to be done in such a way that promotes the people the most way. So by limiting H-1Bs, the small category, 20,000 for people who are chances for master's degrees, and limiting the other to 65, you're sort of closing out the United States market. And the more people start to understand that dynamics, the more important it is. And I think that the economist way of thinking about society is much more real than the Main Street way, because the Main Street way is, there's a job, either I'm going to get the job or Susan's going to get a job.
Yep.
In an economic way, oh my God, Susan may get the job, but Susan may make the company be super successful, and then Susan may hire me. It's just a different way to think about it.
I think that's really interesting. You mentioned this H-1B application fee can affect on the labor market, and essentially that can increase price at the end of the day. And I don't think we think that far, right? So it's really interesting.
Well, for you, and also, we're not alone. The United States is not alone, and I'm sure that people from the embassy know this, that other countries are also interested in the work that you do. And right now, the rising sun of China has happened, where they're sort of making it easy for a lot of students who were turned away from the United States to go there. We have a strong competition with Canada right now, which is even in our own atmosphere, not that hard to live through, and they're very transparent about the things they do, and they have a better immigration system that isn't set up once a year, but different providences, and a lot of the freedoms and protections that the United States gives that we're sort of facing. We haven't seen much going on in Latin America as much as sort of a challenge to the immigration system, but we have seen rising places happen sort of on the continent of Africa that people are saying, South Africa, Nigeria are saying, well, maybe you should come here, and we're going to start and build here, and there's no fee for that. So if the focus is here, and you're also able to show, well, if it's not here, it's going somewhere else. That's another way to make America understand what's going on. You make it more complex for me here, I have a better opportunity. Let me show you what we did in this country, what we did in that country, what we're doing in that country. Because that's one of the fears in the global market, that we're going to lose in the platform. And that's the biggest concern behind the fee, is that companies are going to say, well, I'm a global company. So let's talk about that. I think this is a really important conversation to have, specifically with Korean companies. When you're an international company, you're not limited to just the H-1B. You also have the L visa. There's tons of visas that you may have in your realm. You should think about those. Most American companies have a platform around the world. So that once again, they're going to say, why am I going to pay somebody this and then hire them here when I can just send them abroad for a year, bring it back on the L, not have all these challenges along the way. So that's answer number one. But you limit companies' new starts when you sort of have these high capacities, because it only goes to the international footprint. So the more you establish your office, the greater it is. And even when Korean companies think about coming to the United States, you should look at the L visa to sort of say, let me do a startup office. Let me see if I can get it off the ground. Let me see if I can run. Let me have a platform to get it running. It's a big perspective. So when you set up that office, you need to have a plan for the first 5 years, and a growth issue, because you only get the visa for 1 year to be able to extend it. That's another way of showing growth and opportunity in the United States. If you see the ability to sort of present yourself here, moving away from sort of these sort of short-term things that happen with the after plant building. That after plant thing is not unique to Korea. Every other company has the same situation. Tons of people cross the Canadian border every day to come in and do a technical thing and then go back, right? Because once again, when you have this sort of dynamic view of life where you realize the person who sits at the office and gets the technology running is not the same person who sits in the office every day and actually does the job. When you move away from that one-to-one reality, you go, okay, yeah, it's smart. This company has a team. And I think people, the best way to give this is like grocery stores to talk to Americans about it. There are no people in the grocery store that set up the grocery store. They work in the grocery store and they run the grocery store, but they didn't build the grocery store. They decided where the aisles were going to be. They didn't do the fashion technology. They didn't do the electronics. They didn't do the cash registers. Someone else's full-time job is to go from state to state, setting up this grocery store. So why can we not have that same thing in a world perspective and say, this is what they do for this short period of time? So the company doesn't need to hire 15 people to do 15 stores with a skill that's only need once for that store. And that's sort of an understanding that we're sort of trying to help push forward.
So I think your perspective is really interesting because you don't just look at the phenomenon, you look at the other connections and the broader view here. So I'm glad that you brought up the other cases in other countries and how they are trying to attain high-skilled workers, right? So I think recently there was news about China creating K visa, you know. So do you think that those kind of competition in the international labor market, do you think that that will make the US kind of become more open to, you know, high skilled workers obtaining those skills? Like, what do you think? Do you think that the US will be more open about it since there's going to be global competitions? Because we are going to lose, like US will lose some high skilled workers.
Yeah, one of our greatest problems that I've found is our arrogance. As Americans, we feel, and we are, and I do have that exceptionalism sort of concept about us, that we stand out, we do a lot of things really well. I've said this in the news and I'll say it here. Our secret sauce has always been welcoming immigrants, no matter what city you're in. If the dynamics of the city is broad and building, there are immigrants there. If there are no immigrants there, at this point in time, those localities are dying out. And I've lived in those places, right? That's part of what I do in this country is go to different places to sort of study that. So the more immigrants in an area, New York, California, Chicago, right? New Jersey, those are the Houston, those Dallas, right? No matter where you think about it, some place that's thriving in an industry, Detroit, right? There are immigrants there. If there are no immigrants there, it is sort of going away. So that's part of what we need to be able to express to people. And the concern is in the place where there are no immigrants and the jobs are dying, they think the immigrant 1,000 miles from them has taken their job from them, has taken something from them, when actually life has taken something away from them, right? They didn't get the right skill set. They don't have the right opportunity. The government didn't invest in the right way. The town didn't invest in them the right way. The town didn't invest in the plant that was there. The plant, you know, they were doing something that AI could do. The biggest challenge to the market for jobs right now is AI. And we're not even dealing with that, right? That's what's really going to replace a lot of the American jobs that people have. Cashiers, right? Truck drivers. Truck drivers is the #1 job in the United States outside the District of Columbia. In the District of Columbia, lawyers are the #1 job. But outside the District of Columbia, in every state, the highest number of people employed are truck drivers. And we're moving to get away from truck drivers. Taxi drivers. Those type of routine jobs, even when you go in a restaurant, now you order a machine. And because we rather think of someone's face as an enemy, rather than technology changing and retooling ourselves to build on that. I'm not saying, by golly Wally, I don't need a landline anymore. We should embrace technology, but we should embrace them in such a way that we don't wind up blaming immigrants for the problem that technology is causing. That's what's eliminating a lot of the jobs because the skill set is there.
That was just interesting. I think that can be another set of conversation actually, but for the time being, we're going to stick to the immigration topics here. And I want to move on to the international student visa rules. So starting this year, there are a lot of rule changes, right? And I think I read somewhere that like now, like Trump administration is going to only 4 years for the student visas, or they're going to look at their Instagrams. Like, what's happening? Can you kind of like walk us through like the visa rule changes for international students?
So on the forefront, anyone coming to the United States, the government has a right to go through your personal effects, all your computers and your technology. So if you're traveling with your proprietary information or personal information, then I just wouldn't bring it. I'd bring a burner phone or a temporary computer. I wouldn't sort of travel with my personal technology because the government has a right to have that. And that means going to your social accounts as well. So you want to look at your social platforms to make sure there's nothing anti-American in those platforms, because that would give the officer discretion to deny you. That's something the government has basically said to you. So that's for students and anyone above that. And when students are here, even when green cards are here, you're now perceived as a guest. So that entire time reminds you that your social media and all those things can be tracked by the government. So for me, what I tell my clients now is just don't have it. right? Just no need to post about it, no need to be involved in the political conversation. Until we're past the stage of where we are developing and it's clear, there's no need to have these accounts to talk about, because on a visa application, you have to disclose that information.
Right.
And what the government has done, which has sort of been hit by the courts right now, you saw the court ruling with regards to the Pakistan students. So it may go down a little bit of a different effect in the long run, but while we're sort of working on the law, the officers still have the discretion. So just remove the discretion by not having the emails. So there's a lot of talk about that. There's another proposed rule. So when students come to the United States, they have duration of status. Always been that way. This is what the government is trying to change in this proposed rule to sort of make it harder for students to come in and for when you travel and how you pick up your visa. Those are complexities that really hit South Korea. So when we had this shutdown of student visa processing that happened really around the Middle East, people weren't able to get here in time for this year because the embassies were closed. There was a freeze on student visas because we needed to vet them more than we already did. So costly because you've made these travel plans and these arrangements to be in these places and you have to start school at a certain time. Foreign students bring almost $3 billion to our economy every year. And we use that money, they pay full freight. There are some Fulbright scholarships, but for the most part, they pay full freight and they sort of tradition those. That's a greater thing to also show in your numbers, like what colleges you are supporting and building. So I think the US is gonna hurt for a minute, just like we are with tariffs, and we may change our perspective. The concern has always been when something shifts, like the market shifts to China right now with regards to students going to China, that we think that we are good enough that we're still going to be able to compete, and not until we have the full ramifications that it's something different. And a prime example of that would be exactly what we've seen. There's no greater explanation of why many of the engineers are in India other than the Indian government decided we're going to lean into this industry. When you think about the tech devices that are built in Korea, there's no other thing behind it besides you decided you're going to lean into that industry. The United States lean sometimes, but what they generally lean into, they pick from other places. So it's generally a foreign national company. They sort of take the technology from whatever that is and sort of brings it here. So that's one of our challenges. So I think the dollar amounts may hurt long enough, and we may find that an anti-immigration sentiment doesn't build our economy. And your plant, or the plant in Georgia, is a prime example of that, because now you see the Georgians who were going to take jobs at the plant and the different congressional people from that state saying, what did we do here and why did we do it?
I think that was an excellent point. So now, like, I'll know about the future, like looking ahead, what should Korean companies and policymakers realistically expect from US visa and immigration policy over the next few years under Trump administration?
So find yourself in the space again where it's not about being right, it's about avoiding the issue. So I understand that there are rights and responsibilities, and I tell you that, but I don't want you or someone to be in secondary. I don't want someone to be caught up. So if you can avoid those issues, here are the things that I would avoid in those issues. If you are a visitor in any capacity, the social media and the computer thing, just don't have technology that you don't want the United States to see or sort of go through. Be clear about what you're coming to the United States for, and whether it's work or not work, and how you sort of fit to the categories. You should tell your employee to have the ability to sort of regurgitate that or have a letter. If they don't speak English, which is not the standard in the United States, they should have a letter along with their passport and their I-94 card that explains why they're in the United States. So if they're in contact with someone, they can say this, and then that will be the forefront to make a decision of to whether something's gonna happen. You can't solve all issues, but that level of clarity is needed, as well as a contact number on that letter to say, if there's an issue, you contact this person or contact that person, and that person should know if something happens to contact that person. Those are just basic things. Business development. If you hire H-1Bs, which I think it's generally the opposite way. If you're a foreign student, you're coming here for an H-1B, you got to start planning from year one, exactly what the end of the goal is going to be. And you should focus in your industries that you know you can develop in to start making that relationship to potentially get to the H-1B or some other visa before you graduate, which may include doing a master's degree. A bachelor's degree for a foreign national right now doesn't really distinguish you. You're going to have to get a master's or a doctorate to sort of stand out in this market, and it is what it is. So those are just realities when you're making those choices. So maybe you don't get your bachelor's degree here. Maybe you only come here for your master's degree to sort of cop it off to do the second thing. If there are places where there are going to be a huge number of people doing installation, there should be a work site immigration facilitator on site, someone who speaks English and Korean that is there with this large group of individuals. So if something goes down, they are there to have the conversation, right? They are skilled individuals. This is their job. Sort of like someone who does I-9s and verification for a US company. You're here for this? Oh, great, let's have this conversation. No, we're here. This is who's here. This is the visas they have. They know what's going on in this plant. And that might have happened in Georgia, but it has not hit me yet that there was someone at the plant that was capable of handling that situation, of taking the realm of saying. So when I do worksite enforcements, the government shows up, they call me, and then I have the conversation with the government. There needs to be that level of contact. And I think that works in two ways. One, it makes the individuals at the plant feel like, okay, this company knows what's going on and they're behind me and there's somebody here who to facilitate that. And then number two, it shows you that we tried to be compliant. We have done here is the paperwork in which we've gone through and thought about this process, and we've been compliant, and we have someone here with the files who's ready to be compliant. And this is who they are, and this is what they're doing, period, right? And you distinguish between everyday work that we pay, and you don't pay them in the United States, and you have all that sort of set up. That is fundamental compliance work that should be done by any company that's bringing over any number of individuals at this point in time. So just avoid that issue. If you're coming over just visiting, once again, you got to have your valid passport with you. Clear, make sure the picture's clear, everything's clear. You have at least 6 months on it. You have the I-94 card. You don't get the I-94 card at the port of entry anymore. You need to print that off and put it in your passport and carry it with you everywhere you go. Everywhere you go on your person, you have that document with you to say, this is who I am and this is why I'm in the country. And those are just some simple tips to go forward, because right now we are in an enforcement situation. And even I, as an American, carry my passport when I travel, because in the United States, because I don't want to have the conversation with regards to, do you have this document or do you not have this document?
Yeah, I think you have to be really prepared, especially under the Trump administration.
And in the District of Columbia or any place that's sort of being occupied, you even want to be more careful about that situation.
That's a good point. So finally, before we turn to the audience, do you have any advice for National Assembly members and staff regarding U.S. immigration policy and reform?
Sure. So I think the key to success, so as I said, I worked at Baker McKenzie. I passed the labor regulations, how we do perm. I worked on that regulation with the Hill. You want to have a relationship with the Hill. Your goal for it is a relationship with the Hill and sort of building that relationship. And one of the things that I think, and so this is me outside of community, saying this to you as community, is that I have found within the diaspora of Asian nationals, they divide their power up into these groups where you might have a stronger power if you work together towards a unique goal. So there's a strong relationship with Japanese culture. There's a strong Chinese platform. There's a strong South Asian platform. Working together to say, this is the whole screw of who we are as a power, as even though your conjoined points may get you further than you are sort of working separately, as you have seen in Europe, right? The European bloc sort of works together. You've even seen that in Latin America, right? Even in the United States, right? The North American Agreement. So sort of having this concept of saying, realizing that the typical American doesn't have the understanding of the diversity of the group. Okay, let's put the group together and sort of build the power, because individually, you're recognizable. Together, it is quite a dynamic, specifically with the South Asian population that's sort of rising right now. And the interesting thing about Indian nationals and South Asian population here is there's so much discrimination against them in immigration that it is unbelievable, between Chinese nationals and Indian nationals waiting for green cards much longer than any other person in the world. That makes no sense in the American population. It's just deplorable.
I think that it's important that you brought up the coalition buildings among different Asian groups.
Yeah.
I think that's like something that we should keep in mind. So thank you, Ellen. Let me turn to the audience. And if you have any question, please state your name and affiliation before you ask the question. Yeah.
Hi, first of all, thank you so much for your lecture today. It's very helpful and informative. I have a question about your last point about building a relationship with the Hill. So do you see that the events that happened in Georgia with the Korean facility, do you think that's because of lack of Korea's relationship with the Hill, like lack of lobbying, because of that? Because Japan is also having a big project with the Kia Steel, and they probably have a lot of visa sponsorship. by the US,
Mhm.
but so because there haven't been any like events that happen in like facilities in run by Japan or China or any other country, so do you think it's because Korea's not like lobbying efforts?
So I think, so the first answer will be yes, but not specifically to the Georgia plan itself, because I think that's a more state level thing that should have been handled. The benefit of that. So there, and let's be honest about that, right? So that was a Biden program that was established. So there's a little bit of,
Yeah.
let me show you that something that Biden said he was doing was done inappropriately. So I'm gonna try to remove that rub, because I'm gonna say we are bigger than that. That it wasn't just about sort of saying this is a Biden project, I'm gonna sort of do the Biden project. So don't think I don't do that. Secondly, you know, there was a news footprint about it when it happened, right? Twice he was there. Or someone from the Biden administration was there. I do think the congressional power is lower, and if it were stronger in state and on the Hill, specifically on the Hill, there would have been a bigger sort of, other than, I mean, I know there was a letter and Andy Kim and I think 20 other people sort of signed it, like a bigger review of what happened, because there is no other way to chop your arm off than to say that you're going to go against this development. I mean, it is, when we saw it as immigration lawyers, we took a gasp because we thought to ourselves, there is no way there is 200 individuals from Korea in this country without documentation. You can't even, or that overstayed their visa. I'm not even buying that. That's not a story to have, right? At a plant, no. 1, 2 Koreans maybe, but a whole plant of Koreans undocumented setting up, that just doesn't make sense to us. And that's why we immediately were like, the story isn't coming, right? And so the government already had the story. Oh, we got them undocumented. You got the videos and the buses and all that sort of the story. So I think there's an opportunity now to sort of have that conversation, because in that moment, I think other states would love to have that business in their area. And there'll be people who'll say, this will never happen here. This will never happen here. And so I would leverage that in that development with the Hill. But I have found, because I'm in the rooms where people are having immigration conversations, that there are groups that are always not in the room. And in very few occasions have I seen you in the room.
Any other questions?
And I think Senator Padilla would also be a good person to make the relationship with. I don't know if you already have that relationship with, but Padilla is really good on immigration and does a lot of panels and conversations throughout the year where he invites different speakers to talk about exactly what's going on. So.
Hi, this is Jihi from Haifa. Thank you for coming again. My question is, could you elaborate on difference between E3 and H-1B visa?
Okay, so the E3 visa is a special treaty relationship that we have with Australia, which is, the standards are the same, a little bit of sort of the processing of it. The limitation is there's no visa cap on it, and you can process it any time of the year.
No visa cap?
Well, I mean, we haven't reached it.
Oh.
So in effect, there's no really cap, because of people, I forget what the number is from Australia coming, but it's never been so much that it's unmanageable. The same thing with the H-1B ones from Chile. Never always available. So when you ask yourself, if you have visas that are unused, could they be better used someplace else? And that becomes a good conversation to have. Like, we have people who could use this, and it's just sitting over here for somebody who's not using it. Yeah, so, but the LCA process is the same. Processing at the embassy is sort of the same regulations. There's no upper end. So like, you could do it over and over again. You're supposed to have a non-immigrant intent, meaning you're not going to stay. So you see many people who go E3 to H-1B. It's just sort of a zone for them to sort of work in. If I were thinking about what would I want in a Korean visa for this country, it would be similar to the H-1B one, less the E3 program or the TN program, unless those are just after technical things. So those visas are very limited in scope. The TN might be a good one because it gives a longer time frame. After manufacturing things for short term, those might be fun. But if the real answer is we need to have sort of a runway, the H-1B one is a better sort of scope to be it, because it gives the same benefits as an H-1B one. You get the same time frame to actually get here and get things done, and you're not so limited in coming back and forth. Whereas with the E3, I mean, once again, also super far, right, to sort of travel to the United States to get that done, because most people rather do it than play it through the government, because the government takes so long. So that would be the metric that I would sort of think about it. And once again, there's a coalition of people right now who are hungry to figure out, should there be a visa category for this? It shouldn't have a limit on it, because if we're just developing a business here, it's gonna
Right.
give you
Yeah.
two more jobs.
Right.
So that may be a time to sort of network with other companies to say, let's together go in and say, this is what we're gonna do. I'm sure the government's gonna say, well, you have this ESTA, you have this whatever, and you say, well, listen, that's not clear enough. And there is a B in lieu of an H-1B that immigration lawyers know about, which is something that someone who might qualify for an H-1B who's coming in for a short period of time may want to do off the cusp, and you can just talk to an attorney about that.
Yeah.
But that's not really a metric, because how many of you knew about that? Probably one or two of you, if at all. So if it's not known, it's not used.
Right.
Yeah.
I have another question about H-1B visa. So
Yeah.
since with the increased fee of H-1B application, so it's only big companies that can afford to pay it. So since with the high fees, it becomes less attractive options for companies, I guess. So what do you think the companies will shift their eye on, like different type of visa? Like you mentioned about L visa, but that might take a while. So what like alternative option?
There really isn't one right now. This government has sort of shut down a lot of the pathways. There's a natural interest visa, which depending on where you're from might not get you close enough to get you the green card, and maybe you don't want the green card. You would be amazed at where money comes from. If you're an employer, you really need someone. In that period from Friday night to Saturday morning, we had companies ready to write checks because they needed the individuals here and they didn't want them to be abroad. We had two things going, like, can this person work from their home country? And do we need to be in the United States? For me, from the embassy side of things, I would be thinking about, how do I get those foreign nationals to come to my country? Right? I mean, I'd be honest. I'd be like, okay, they're trained here. They have this technology. I want to build on this. I'm going to bring them to my country and then come back on the L in a reverse way. But companies will pay the money. It'll be distributed just like any other cost. I mean, an H-1B visa is not cheap. There are already fees that are paid to the government in training and asylum, and the cost of getting someone here and having to send them home if they're not here and having to pay them a certain wage. I mean, there's just a lot of cost involved in H-1B that doesn't even exist for American workers.
More questions? Okay. If not, we're gonna close here. So
Okay.
Allen, thank you so much for your insights today on US immigration policy and visa reforms and broader implications for South Korean businesses, workers, and students. And we're really lucky to have you here to just
Thank you. Happy to
share
join.
your insights. So, and I also want to thank everyone for joining here this morning and this important engagement. So at KIPEC, we look forward to continuing this conversation at our future events and supporting the stronger cooperation between the United States and South Korea. So thank you.